Here at the World Economic Forum, I got to moderate a Wall Street Journal panel that included Treasury Secretary Steven Mnuchin. I asked him if President Trump is correct in saying that the US economic boom is indeed unprecedented.
First of all, you have to look at this on a relative basis, not just an absolute basis. So there's no question the U.S. economy is outperforming the rest of the world. There's been a significant slowdown in the rest of the world, and we've had a significant increase since the Obama economy, creating an abundance, millions of new jobs, created a very significant increase in wages while we're growing GDP. And there's no question this is a result of the president's economic program, which we designed during the campaign of tax cuts, regulatory relief, and trade. And I think particularly this year, now we've had a very big week in both signing the Phase 1 China deal and passing the U.S.-Mexico-Canada agreement. I think these will be very important to the U.S. economy for the balance of this year.
Do you think that obviously there was a big lift in boosting growth, almost 3%, 2.9% of growth in 2018. That did seem to be a direct response to the heavy fiscal impulse that came from the big tax cuts passed at the end of 2017. That does seem to have passed, and growth seems to be sort of slipping back in 2019. Estimates around 2.25%, maybe this year around 2%. Did we just get a one-off boost from that huge fiscal impulse, or is this lost?
Absolutely not. So, I mean, I would say 2019, again, did well on an absolute basis, was definitely slowed down from, one, the world economy slowing down. So there's no question that China and Europe slowed down pretty dramatically. Also, we had the beginning of the impact of Boeing, the 737 MAX, and we had the GM strike. So there's no question all those issues, probably cut about 50 to 70 basis points off of growth last year. And I know we'll hear projections from the IMF and others, but we think people's projections are too low this year for 2020.
Has U.S. growth over the last year or two been held back by concerns about global trade?
I don't think so. I mean, I think, again, it's clearly been held back by a slowdown around the world. We could debate to what extent I think that slowdown was not created by our trade issues. I think that slowdown was well in advance of trade. But there's no question there was a slowdown, and a global slowdown has an impact on global trade.
The president once again mentioned today in his remarks that, in his view, at least, growth would have been stronger if the Federal Reserve had been more accommodating, had not raised rates and so quickly and had cut them more quickly. Do you agree with that?
Well, I think in my role of Secretary of Treasury, I'm careful about commenting on Fed policy.
It seems a bit puzzling that your boss can criticize the Fed, but you choose not to. Is that?
Absolutely. He's the president. I'm Secretary of the Treasury.
So we can expect. So even though you don't think trade has played a role, presumably you think that the Phase 1 trade deal you've got, the USMCA that you've got, earlier you did a US-South Korea renegotiation. You think all of those will actually help to lift growth?
That's right. And again, when we talk about growth, GDP is one measure of growth. And again, the way GDP is calculated, there's a bunch of things that impact GDP that are one-time events. So I'm not particularly focused on kind of whether GDP was higher or whether GDP was lower. What I'm focused on is, what did it do to employment? What did it do to labor force participation? What did it do to wages? What did it do to consumer spending? And what is the forecast going forward? I think there's no question when we look at the forecast for 2020, business in the U.S. feels very good. And there's no question that now the two trade deals we've done will have an impact this year. I would say on the other side, again, depending on how long it takes for the 737 MAX to get back into production, that's going to have an impact on headline GDP. I've already said publicly that could be 50 basis points in GDP. But again, I wouldn't focus too much on the GDP number. We could have easily hit 3% if the facts had been slightly different.
The U.S. economy has been a jobs-producing machine for a long time. 2.5 million jobs a year. We've said the unemployment rate very low. How much longer can that go on, given the inevitable constraints on labor supply?
Well, I think there's a lot of things we still need to do. Talked about apprenticeship programs, need to make sure there's better education programs for skilled labor. We need to make sure that people who are getting advanced PhDs, that we can keep them working at our companies. I do think the participation rate can continue to go higher. I think productivity, we can spend a lot of time talking about why productivity is where it is, but I think there's upside in productivity. And I think, look, the president wants to fix immigration. That's part of it. Legal immigration has to ultimately be part of the equation.